If there were chariots found in the Red Sea, it would probably have something to do with the crossing of the sea.
A strange stillness settled over the water moments before the divers descended. The kind of quiet that presses against the ears and makes the world feel freshly hushed. It was early morning at the Gulf of Suez, the light pouring over the Red Sea like molten gold as a small expedition team prepared for what they expected to be an uneventful mapping dive. The surface shimmered innocently, hardly hinting at the revelation waiting in its depths. When the divers slipped beneath the waves, they expected little more than coral formations and sediment drifts. Instead, they sank into a world holding fragments of a story long whispered across millennia. A story that, once confronted face to face, left even seasoned Egyptologists stunned into silence. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. What the team encountered did not initially seem extraordinary. Sand swirled along the seafloor, shaped into graceful ripples by the steady current. Coral grew in pale fans and irregular clusters, but scattered among the landscape were rigid shapes that did not belong to the underwater world. The first diver slowed upon noticing a large, wheel-shaped form half buried in sand. Its shape was unmistakable, a spoked chariot wheel, long stripped of wood but still supported by a metallic framework that should have disintegrated long ago. The diver, convinced at first it must be a modern artifact, swam closer, brushing away sand, and froze as more wheels emerged from the seafloor in every direction. Some had fused with coral. Others lay cleanly exposed, undisturbed as though gently placed there. The sheer number of them created a sprawling pattern across the seabed. Word spread quickly among the team as more findings emerged. Skeletal remains, though fragile, positioned in ways that suggested sudden violence. The shattered remnants of chariot bodies, pieces of weaponry, and most startling of all, a pair of wheels still aligned upright, anchored by a gold-colored axle that gleamed even in the dim underwater light. It was the kind of scene that seemed too cinematic to be real, yet here it was, suspended in water that had kept it hidden for thousands of years. As the divers surfaced with their first photographs, the atmosphere above the waves shifted instantly. The crew who had remained on deck watched expressions melt from curiosity to disbelief. These weren't the random fragments of an ancient shipwreck or discarded relics from some minor conflict. They suggested something far larger, something tied to one of the most debated events in human history: the fate of a powerful army said to have perished as the waters of the Red Sea crashed back upon them. By the time Egyptologists arrived on site, the expedition had expanded from a modest dive to an international effort marked by urgency and trembling anticipation. Each descent revealed more evidence, and each discovery raised more questions than answers. Those initial days were filled with a mix of awe, apprehension, and scientific hunger. Even without drawing conclusions, the sheer concentration of ancient remains indicated a catastrophic event had unfolded at this precise location. The Egyptologists moved cautiously, knowing that extraordinary claims demanded extraordinary verification. Their first step was cataloging the chariot components, many of which showed features consistent with designs from the 18th and 19th dynasties. Wheels with six-spoke structures, axles of specific proportions, and jointing styles characteristic of elite military units. These were not rural transport carts or ceremonial vehicles. They were instruments of war made for speed, mobility, and battlefield precision. The remains of horses and soldiers, though fragmentary, were also telling. Their distribution across the seabed formed chaotic patterns, suggesting swift destruction rather than a slow sinking or a gradual deterioration. Bones lay twisted and mixed, sometimes preserved in eerie alignments, hinting at desperate struggle. Weapons scattered across the area still retained identifiable shapes: bronze spearheads, portions of shields, and deteriorated quiver components. Every fragment deepened the impression that this was not mere debris, but the remains of a large-scale disaster. The weight of the discovery settled on the Egyptologists slowly, like a heavy cloak. For centuries, scholars had debated stories of an ancient army lost beneath the Red Sea. Some dismissed such tales as allegory, others as exaggerated folklore. Now, standing on the research vessel with tangible evidence accumulating below, the team found themselves staring into the past in a way no one had anticipated. The implications were staggering. If the remains truly belonged to a royal military division from the New Kingdom period, the historical timeline of several events could shift dramatically. For archaeologists, it opened a new avenue of research, prompting questions about troop movement, coastal geography, and military logistics during a pivotal era of Egyptian rule. The patterns in which the relics were submerged could reveal how armies navigated the land bridges and shallow waters that once shaped the region. The chariot fragments alone offered unprecedented insight into ancient craftsmanship and engineering, potentially rewriting long-held assumptions about mobility and warfare. Yet even as the scientific possibilities multiplied, the emotional impact struck with equal force. It was impossible to view the underwater field of wreckage without imagining the panic of the soldiers, the crash of water, the final desperate moments frozen in time. The Red Sea, calm and dazzling on the surface, concealed a silent graveyard. The divers, returning again and again to map new sections, reported feeling a strange reverence as they moved among the relics. The water muffled all sound, turning their movements into a solemn procession through the remains of an ancient catastrophe. The Egyptologists, though trained to maintain professionalism, felt that same weight. The discovery did not simply expand academic knowledge. It confronted them with a visceral reminder of how stories passed down through generations can sometimes trace their roots to real events. Whether or not this specific site aligned with the timeline of a legendary crossing, it undeniably captured the sudden destruction of a powerful military force. The scale and location of the findings made it impossible to ignore parallels between the underwater field and long-debated historical accounts. Scientific teams began systematically scanning the site using sonar sweeps, photogrammetry, and sediment analysis to assemble a comprehensive map. As this happened, a clearer picture emerged. The remains stretched across a broad swath of seafloor, concentrated most heavily along an underwater ridge that might once have been a land route during periods of lower sea levels. This ridge, now submerged by centuries of geological shifts, offered clues to how an army could have marched through the region without boats. The arrangement of chariot parts suggested that the vehicles had been in motion at the moment of destruction. Wheels angled downward as if pulled by sinking horses. Axles protruded from sediment like skeletal limbs. Some chariots lay overturned, their frames buckled as though flung with tremendous force. Such details painted a vivid picture of sudden chaos, not the slow decay typical of a shipwreck. If these were indeed royal military chariots, their destruction would have marked a devastating blow to the kingdom that commanded them. The Egyptologists cross-referenced stylistic features of the chariot parts with known artifacts from museum collections and previously excavated battlefields. The results pointed toward the possibility of elite units, perhaps even a division personally commanded by a ruler or a high-ranking military official. While the materials could not be tied to a specific individual, the sheer number of chariots suggested an army on the scale of a major expedition or pursuit. As the evidence continued to accumulate, debates ignited among researchers, not over the authenticity of the discovery. Its reality was undeniable, but over how it fit into the broader sweep of Egyptian history. Some scholars argued that the remains could have belonged to an expedition caught in a storm or a tidal surge. Others pointed to the concentration of artifacts along the ridge, suggesting a land passage suddenly overwhelmed by water. Still others emphasized the alignment between the location and certain long-known narratives describing the catastrophic loss of a pharaonic force in this very region. Regardless of interpretation, one undeniable truth emerged. The Red Sea had preserved a moment of immense historical significance, one that had gone unseen for thousands of years. The sense of walking through a sealed time capsule infused every dive with a combination of exhilaration and somber respect. It became clear that the artifacts did not merely tell of military might, they told of human desperation, courage, and vulnerability. What worried the Egyptologists most was the fragility of the site. Time had protected it, but time could also destroy it. Strong currents threatened to erode delicate structures. Modern activity in the region, shipping routes, industrial runoff, and tourism represented potential long-term risks. The team understood that preserving the site's integrity required delicate balance. They documented meticulously, recorded each fragment, and prioritized non-invasive exploration methods. The divers experienced moments that stayed with them long after resurfacing. One described the eerie sight of two wheels still standing upright, as if waiting for the missing body of the chariot to be rebuilt. Another spoke of seeing a bronze-tipped arrow wedged into a piece of coral, frozen in the exact position where it had landed thousands of years earlier. These artifacts did not feel like objects. They felt like echoes. As days passed into weeks, Egyptologists found themselves emotionally entangled in the unfolding narrative. The discovery challenged them to reconsider the relationship between legend and archaeology. It also reminded them that historical events often leave behind traces in unexpected places, waiting to be unearthed. The Red Sea, long associated with trade routes, migrations, and ancient kingdoms, now revealed another chapter of its hidden memory. The gravity of the discovery reached beyond academic discourse. It touched on the human fascination with origins, migrations, and the dramatic events that shape civilizations. The idea of an army vanishing beneath the sea had always lived somewhere between history and myth, between reverence and skepticism. Now, fragments of that ancient tragedy lay visible, captured by cameras and measured by scientists. As the research vessel became a hub of activity, the atmosphere on board changed. Long discussions filled the evenings, filled with hypotheses, debates, and quiet contemplation. The Egyptologists found themselves drawn to the implications not only for the past, but for the future of archaeological exploration in underwater environments. If such a discovery could hide beneath the Red Sea for thousands of years, what else might lie in similar regions? The event underscored the need to view ancient landscapes not as static, but as dynamic spaces shaped by natural forces over millennia. Every discovery brought the team closer to understanding the scale of the tragedy. The number of chariots alone indicated a significant force, far greater than what would typically be lost in a skirmish or minor battle. Combining this with the distribution of bones and weapons, researchers concluded that the event must have occurred rapidly, overwhelming the soldiers before they could retreat. The sea, in its vastness, had preserved this narrative in silence. The Egyptologists faced the challenge of interpreting the findings without speculation, relying solely on the evidence before them. Yet the emotional resonance of the site was impossible to ignore. It forced the team to confront how history is recorded, not just through written accounts, but through the physical remnants of human experience. The underwater field of chariots became a testament not only to military ambition, but also to the vulnerability of civilizations. As the mapping progressed, subtle details emerged that spoke to the craftsmanship of the ancient charioteers. The remains showed evidence of meticulous construction, joints fitted with remarkable precision, decorations that suggested elite status, and reinforcement points placed strategically to balance speed with durability. Such details offered valuable insight into ancient engineering techniques that had previously been inferred but rarely confirmed. The discovery enriched the understanding of how Egyptian military technology evolved and how it influenced broader regional practices. Reflecting on the broader implications, Egyptologists recognized that the site could recalibrate existing timelines. If dated accurately, the discovery might reveal the presence of Egyptian forces in the region at a time previously unconfirmed by terrestrial excavations. It could illuminate the political dynamics of the era, hinting at conflicts, pursuits, or strategic movements undocumented in the surviving records. The discovery also offered clues about the geological history of the Red Sea. Sediment layers suggested that water levels had fluctuated dramatically over thousands of years. This led geologists to collaborate with the Egyptologists, analyzing how shifting coastlines and submerged ridges might have influenced ancient travel routes. Such interdisciplinary work expanded the significance of the site far beyond archaeology, making it a point of convergence for experts across multiple fields. With each passing day, the weight of what lay beneath the waves pressed more deeply on the minds of those involved. The divers, often the first to witness new findings, described an almost spiritual sense of stepping into a moment suspended in time. Visibility varied from dive to dive, but even on the clearest days, the silence felt absolute. It was as though the sea itself guarded the memories it had absorbed. The Egyptologists often gathered on deck after hours, discussing what the discovery meant not just academically, but philosophically. The artifacts had endured far longer than the empire that created them. The army that once marched with confidence and authority had been reduced to scattered remnants resting quietly on the seafloor. It served as a humbling reminder of the impermanence of power. Yet the discovery also highlighted the enduring nature of human curiosity. For generations, people had wondered about the truth behind stories of armies swallowed by the sea. Now, without seeking to prove or disprove any specific narrative, the team had uncovered evidence that an event of extraordinary scale had indeed occurred. The sea had concealed it, but it had not erased it. The implications for cultural memory were profound. People throughout history had grappled with the relationship between myth and reality. This discovery existed at that intersection, challenging scholars to separate evidence from interpretation, while acknowledging that ancient stories often carried kernels of truth shaped by collective memory. The remains on the seafloor offered a tangible anchor for exploring how catastrophic events become embedded in cultural consciousness. The Egyptologists worked tirelessly to preserve what they could, documenting every artifact with care. The site demanded patience and respect. They approached it not as treasure hunters or sensationalists, but as custodians of a story that had waited too long to surface. They knew that their role was not to impose a narrative, but to reveal the fragments of one that had unfolded in a moment of chaos thousands of years ago. Even as they continued their work, the sense of wonder did not fade. The divers reported new findings each day: another wheel, another spearhead, another fragment of a chariot's decorative trim. Each piece extended the invisible thread connecting the present to a distant past. The Egyptologists, in turn, translated those discoveries into understanding, piecing together the possible sequence of events with the meticulous care of those who know they are handling something irreplaceable. The environment itself became part of the story. The clarity of the water on some dives allowed the divers to see hundreds of meters across the underwater field, watching the ghostly outlines of chariots appear in the distance. On murkier days, the visibility shrank, forcing the team to navigate by instruments and memory. Yet even in poor conditions, the sense of presence remained strong. The sea seemed reluctant to give up its secrets too easily. The discovery redefined the relationship between archaeology and the natural world. It demonstrated how underwater environments, though challenging, could preserve details that would have vanished on land. The Red Sea had become a time capsule, its depth shielding artifacts from erosion, looting, and the typical decay of organic material. In doing so, it allowed Egyptologists to witness aspects of ancient life, military organization, craftsmanship, and disaster that might otherwise have remained unknown. As the research progressed, the team prepared comprehensive reports and began planning long-term studies. Their work was far from complete. The site promised years of further exploration. But even at this early stage, the significance was undeniable. The remains of chariots, bones, and weapons had opened a window into a moment that had shaped the course of a kingdom's history, regardless of which ruler had led the army or which conflict had driven it to that fateful place. Throughout the process, the Egyptologists remained mindful of the human dimension behind the artifacts. Each wheel belonged to a chariot driven by a soldier with ambitions, fears, and loyalties. Each spear had been held by a hand that might have trembled or steadied in the face of danger. The underwater graveyard was not just a collection of remnants. It was the final imprint of real lives halted abruptly by forces beyond their control. The divers and researchers alike came to understand that the Red Sea, for all its beauty, was a keeper of memories. The discovery challenged assumptions, expanded knowledge, and invited contemplation. It encouraged Egyptologists to re-examine long-held beliefs and explore new ways of interpreting the past. It also offered a reminder that some of history's most compelling stories lie hidden in places where land meets water, waiting patiently to be noticed. Even as the team prepared for future expeditions, they knew that their first encounter with the underwater field would remain one of the defining moments of their careers. The discovery bridged the gap between ancient tragedy and modern exploration, drawing together disciplines, perspectives, and generations. It illuminated the persistent human search for understanding. An effort to piece together the fragments of time, to connect scattered remnants into coherent narrative, and to honor the events that shaped the world long before the present. The waves that lapped against the sides of the research vessel offered a serene contrast to the tumult preserved below. In that duality, the Egyptologists found meaning. The sea, calm on the surface, hid depths where history lay sleeping. Their work had awakened part of that history, not through myth or speculation, but through patient observation and respectful exploration. The discovery beneath the Red Sea stood not as confirmation of any single tale, but as a profound reminder that the past leaves traces, and those traces wait quietly until the moment they are found. As the sun set over the water, casting fiery reflections across the waves, the team paused to absorb the enormity of what they had uncovered. The Red Sea, ancient and enigmatic, had relinquished a secret thousands of years old, and in doing so, it had drawn the Egyptologists into a narrative far larger than they had anticipated, a narrative carved into the seabed by the wheels of chariots and the footsteps of men, preserved by silence, and revealed at last to those willing to dive deep enough to find it. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on this discovery and what you expect will happen next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.